Okay, guys, welcome to The Zone. It's been about 2 months since I've even been on my PC and a bit of full of a chest infection. So we'll try to get through this video as best as we can, but I wanted to talk about pretty much football. It's about my only interest these days. The gaming has kind of faded away, and so I'm still on the football buzz, probably always will be, and I like to chat about it. So we're basically going to run through the games very briefly and quickly from what I saw of the week. Maybe in the comments you can fill in the gaps. And also I want to talk about Chelsea specifically and Manchester United. Dad's a Chelsea fan, so I watch a lot of Chelsea, read about a lot of Chelsea. Grew up watching Chelsea, obviously, and still watch the matches when he's watching the matches. And obviously I support United, so I watch all the United games. So we'll start with the Chelsea news that basically they've spent an absolute ton. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing in any way. The people are freaking out about financial fair play. How are they affording these players? How have they spent £800 million? And, you know, is it healthy for the league, etc.? Well, I'm coming at it from a different perspective, and I'm a United fan, so it's no, like, hate or anything. I think what they're doing is great. The reason I think it's great is because they are a club trying to win, and that's what sport's about. Sport's about winning. It's not about, hey, you finished 7th, you played some lovely stuff at times, but then you lost and you sold all your best players. That's not how sport should work. All the clubs in the Premier League that have been in there for a fair amount of years are very rich, and they have the ability to spend a lot of money, to generate a lot of money, and we shouldn't be praising teams that have one good season, have a few good games here and there, and then go and sell their best players. Because if you're a fan of that team, let's say you're a fan of Brighton, you've probably sold your 2 best players. If you're a fan of West Ham, you've sold your best player, and you're going to sell the next one to Man City, etc. You get the point. You're meant to be a team that is trying to win games. The idea is you're in the Premier League to win the Premier League. You have all the money and tools in the world to do it, and you should be trying to do it. Chelsea have spent an insane figure, but listen, the club was just purchased and all the debt was wiped. That helps massively. They've sold £400 million worth of players, and they will boot them out the door if they're not good enough. Comparatively, Manchester United are just not ruthless enough. Look at Harry Maguire. The manager has basically told him, you're not wanted here, you're not captain. Even when, which we'll get into, Martinez gets pulled off, Lindelof is coming on. Even though that's your side of the pitch, you're still sat on the bench. And he's saying, oh, well, I want a bit more compensation to be fired. Well, Manchester United should just do 2 things. Okay, Harry, you now sit in the reserves for the remainder of the year and will never play, and you won't play for England. Is that really what you want to do? Because we'll do that. A bit like PSG threatened with Mbappe. Or you give him his money and say, get out the door, like Chelsea have done with a lot of people, and you just get rid of them. Now, Chelsea have bought Caicedo. In the past, they bought Fernandes, these £100 million players. Man City have a £100 million player. They have Gvardiol and Grealish. Arsenal have got Rice. Chelsea have got them 2. Liverpool, before Caicedo got pinched off them, were going to have a £100 million player by buying Caicedo. Manchester United are the only team in that top bit that don't have one. And you could argue Spurs had one in Harry Kane. The Manchester United plan of pick up the odd player here and there and try and scrape by won't work. Chelsea's plan might work. It might fail, but at least they're going for it. So, how does it work? Well, pretty simply, the length of contract kind of indicates how much you're spending. So, by putting Caicedo on this 8-year deal at £115 million or whatever it is, he's basically becoming like a £15 million asset each year, which sounds pretty cheap for Caicedo. When you tot up all their other spendings, the 600 million, and you divide it by 8 years, that's how you get the figure of why they're allowed to do financial fair play. This is kind of how it works. So they're not doing anything crazy. They basically got £75 million a year to cover. Well, they've sold a ton of players. They've sold Havertz and Mount for 125, so they're actually at a profit. Now, in a few years' time, if they're not winning anything and these players turn out to be duds and they struggle in the league, they might have a problem where these big players on big contracts becomes a problem. But Chelsea are thinking, let's deal with that when it happens. Because let's be honest, if you've been paying attention to football, Newcastle and Man City and a few other clubs kind of have these shell companies and shell clubs that they part own, semi-own. Their brother works for them. Their dad's uncle's, Tom's son's dog's agent, right? They've got links to these clubs. And these clubs just come in and they say, don't worry about it, Chelsea. You're having a bad year. You're having a bad financial year and you need some alleviance for financial fair play. We'll buy your players off you for big money, right? This is how it's going to work. So the other teams need to buck up their ideas and follow suit in a weird way, or at least not hate on Chelsea for trying to win. Because what would we have? We would have, if everybody just stayed in their lane and just didn't really try to spend a lot, we'd end up with the Bundesliga. We pretty much already have the Bundesliga. Man City dominating everything and everyone else just scrapping around. So I'm more than happy to see Chelsea attempt to break that mold and attempt to go out and win some stuff and maybe risk some stuff or maybe not, but go out there and try and be good by having a midfield of Caicedo, Fernandes. You've got Jackson up there. You've now got Chilwell, James. You've got Disasi, I think his name is. You've got these players all linking up and they're trying to win. They've basically got a whole new team. Manchester United yesterday, our striker is a young kid that's got an injured back, and we had a year to prepare to buy him because we had the whole Ronaldo fiasco. Then we had the whole Weghorst. Oh, we'll just get Weghorst in as a cover option because we've got an actual plan. And then we've ended up with a kid with a broken back. Martial still doesn't want to play or isn't fit. And you've ended up with Rashford up front, who isn't even a number 9. He doesn't want to be up there. And if he was injured, we're having to play like Sancho as a false 9 for the whole season. It's crazy, crazy, crazy talk. So Manchester United could have done what Chelsea did and just said, look, I know he's going to Bayern Munich for 100 million, but your owner, Tottenham, has told us Harry Kane has to be sold this year. He cannot leave on a free. So that tells Man United there is a price there that gets you Harry Kane. It might be a full 1.5 times the price. It might be 150 million. You might say, well, that's crazy. He's not worth 150 million. Well, you've ended up buying Rasmus Haaland for 70, right? You're probably going to need a backup for him. If he's any decent, he's going to have to be 30, 40. You're almost working at Harry Kane level money. You sell Maguire and a couple others, you've got yourself Harry Kane. And you might say, oh, they'd never sell to Man United. They would. There would come a point where they had to sell. And even if you're not getting Harry Kane, let's just say it was completely untenable and you just couldn't do it, then go and get yourself 2 strikers. Go and get them bedded in early on in the preseason. He's not even kicked a ball for Manchester United. So this Rasmus Haaland, you know, is expected to carry Man United to a league title. It's not going to happen. So I'm all for teams trying to topple the Man City dominance, whether it comes through shady ways or not. I think for the good of sport, because that's what we watch it for, we should be not praising it, but accepting, yeah, okay, that's the way they're going about trying to beat Man City. Fair enough. You've got clubs like Brighton, right? And it seems weird to shit on Brighton because they're a fantastic little club. And I don't mean little as in small. I just said the word little. They've basically sold McAllister, Caicedo, right, to their star players. So as a Brighton fan, I'm just thinking immediately, we care more about that money than we do winning things. That's honestly just how I see it. Because and they'll get praise and stuff, but West Ham, they win a European trophy. They're going to sell Paquetá, they're going to sell Rice, or they've sold Rice. It's just, we praise these clubs for selling and not winning. It's very strange. The Premier League has become this product, you might have noticed over the last few years, where it's almost like the sports secondary, and they try to sell this story of, oh, wasn't it fantastic? Like the football they played, the style of play, the cheap buys that ended up selling for a lot of money. These are a small club and they managed to finish 8th. What a fantastic storyline. The harsh reality is, if you win nothing and you don't compete and you don't win Premier Leagues, it's irrelevant. You're just basically watching people stock up money and earn crazy wages. That's what you're doing. And then when somebody comes along that's finally good enough to actually elevate your club and they get sold, we're meant to cheer that on. Oh, aren't they such a well-run club? I'm not interested in how well my club is run, really. I'm interested in watching 11 world-class players try and win the Premier League. That's the sport I'm involved in. And it seems to have just faded away. And if you point out that players are expendable, you get in quite a lot of hate online, on Twitter and stuff. For me, managers, players, they're all expendable and no one's bigger than the club. So if someone is just not performing and you have to pay them off to get rid of them, or you just have to sit them in the stands and get somebody in to replace them, I'm completely okay with this. But particularly at Manchester United, it's all about oh, how does the player feel? This is awful. This is da-da-da. Look, it's just sport. People get replaced all the time. And they're just replaceable folks on huge figures, and somebody else will pick them up. So Chelsea, I don't think really are doing too much wrong in terms of their club. I think they're trying to win. And I think that's the reason Chelsea probably over the last, I think it's decade, have been the most winning club. Or since Abramovich entered into football, nobody has won more trophies. It's a stat like that. And I think that's just because they will do anything to win. And we're meant to go, boo, that's terrible, when actually that is the whole idea of sport. Now, when we come to these, I'll just give you a quick run through of the games that I watched, because I've been ill. I watched a lot of football over the weekend. Man City Burnley. The strangest thing about the Man City Burnley game was how there was two things where I just thought, oh, this just feels a bit weird. Number one was this media loving for company in Man City, and I'm thinking, okay, I get it, but we're here to watch a football match and they're trying to compete. And at the end of the game, Vincent Kompany was bezying mates with every single Manchester City employee and person he possibly could do, despite having just lost to them, and his team was pretty awful. That would have riled me up if I was a Burnley player and a proper Burnley fan. I'd have thought, oh, fucking hell, just give him 3 points then, you love him that much. I think they tried to do this miniature version of Man City style, and they gave them so much, what's the word, respect. They didn't even put a tackle in. And they didn't have a shot. And they passed it around, and there were some neat moments, But ultimately, they got absolutely hammered by Man City in every department, and Haaland is just a complete goal-scoring freak. And I just think to get at Man City, you need a brilliant squad and you need to get at them and literally stop them playing, put fouls in, stop the rhythm. Otherwise, they're just going to pass you to death like that old school Barcelona team. Way too much, like I say, way too much, the word eludes me, respect. And they just let them win effectively. And I know they'll say, oh, well, they didn't let them win. Man City were just miles better. Well, there wasn't a level of effort that I would have been impressed with if I was a Burnley fan, personally. We then had, during that match, just to mention, we had more female commentators on the game than male, which is absolutely fine if that's the route you want to go down. But you know for a fact, and you know it's true, that if the women's football was on, and there was just way more men pundits than there were women, there'd be outrage. And the reason I do dislike the female pundits on it is not particularly because they're saying anything wrong or anything worse. It's the chemistry between the show hosts that bugs me, because often in football it's a game of opinions and people get things right or wrong, and you're enjoying the chat, and it's a bit of a back and forth chat, and you might get some insight. And whether it's actually true or not, you kind of half believe it because they've been this top player. You might hear Hasselbank talk about how he should have turned or so-and-so, and you know it to be true because he played in that league, so he knows what it's like to play against another strong male centre-back. But in these scenarios, we're just having to listen to somebody effectively guess what it's like to play against a man in the Premier League and what they should have done. And when they say things that are right or wrong or have a bit of conjecture around them, none of the other show hosts will ever have a bit of banter or a bit of argy-bargy back and forth, because they fear that if they start calling out these takes, that they'll be deemed sexist. And I definitely have noticed that. So you've got this weird scenario, can't think of a name, where she came off at the end of the game and she went, oh, Burnley, fantastic, absolutely, such a bright spark, and they really pushed Man City all the way. Those were her words. And I have no problem if that's what she believes, but I know if, let's say, Mika Richards said those, Roy Keane would have been like, push them all the way. They got absolutely annihilated. But because she said it, nobody dares sort of have a bit of back and forth. And I think the show, for me, becomes far too serious. So I just found the whole opening to the Premier League really bizarre. It was like this lovey-dovey match that we had to pretend was really close, but really they got absolutely annihilated. And yeah, just to talk about the whole Pep thing, I don't like Pep Guardiola, not because he's winning everything. I genuinely don't like his style of football. And you might say, oh, that's you're a Man United fan, you just don't like him. No, I liked Liverpool's style of football for many years. I've liked Arsenal's style, and I've even at times liked Chelsea's incredible, like, stout defending of 1-0s. And I quite like Newcastle's style of play right now. I'm not against giving praise, but with Man City, I just don't live for the 5,000 passes when 2-0 up. So the reason I'm mentioning it is Haaland was like, listen, can you just fizz the ball into me more quickly and I might get some more goals? And because he said that, Pep ran onto the pitch at halftime, did this big fucking show and all this like arms in the air talking and all of this. And it just came across as like, bro, what are you doing? And the reason why it annoys me is because, to give you an example, he does it when he's winning and like the match is secured. When he knows he's going to win, he does all the big show because he thinks, well, I'm not going to look like an idiot and have this backfire on me because we're going to win. It was like there was a match in the Champions League with Man City. They were getting pressurised and Ederson started flapping, and he never does this. Like, Ederson never loses his cool, but there was 1 or 2 moments where he was kicking the ball out of play, and everybody was kicking the ball out of the play, and Pep was just silent. He was just saying nothing because it was tense. It was like 0-0, or they were 1-0 down. I can't remember what it was. And it was just silent. Then the moment they like went 3-1 up and they started misplacing passes, he was shouting at him. He was on the floor. He was like, you know how he does, beating the floor and everything. And he just likes to put on a show for the cameras. And it just didn't need to be done at halftime on the football pitch. And I just thought, I wish Haaland would just tell you to fuck off, and he'd just like go sign for Madrid or something. Like, not because I hate Man City, but I just think Pep is so... He likes a player that like is totally placid and moldable and like worships him. Like, I feel like Foden has a bit about him, and Pep doesn't quite like that. And I think Jack Grealish in his first year might have had a bit about him, but he's stamped that out of him now, and now he's just like a pass sideways merchant. Ibrahimovic he sold, and Ibra said, yeah, he just didn't like anybody that ever questioned his methods or had any sort of personality about them. And I just find the Man City team to be so unlikable and bland. So yeah, that's how I feel about that opening game. By the way, Man City are going to walk the league. Not even, no doubt about it. Moving on, the next game I watched was Arsenal Forest. Arsenal, I thought, were shaky, and that's acceptable in your first home game. I think you're allowed to be shaky in your first couple of games of a season, right? I don't judge it too much. However, I was a little bit concerned about how poor their defense was. I think their defense was pretty poor. I'm surprised he dropped Gabriel. And I think they looked better when he came on. So I would play Gabriel. I think Saka's world class. I think Martinelli's really good. I think what he's done here, if I was to, and I'm not an Arsenal fan, I would say he's panicked and he's gone too early, meaning he had a really good team and he almost got over the line. And he's thought to himself, God, I've got a really good team here. I don't want to waste their careers and this momentum. And he's gone to try get like the finished team right away. And I think he's going to end up messing up his team. I don't think Havertz is a good footballer. It would stagger me if he turns out to be a good signing for Arsenal. I just don't see it. And I don't think Rice is the player they need. Now, Rice is okay because he's a defensive midfielder. They're always handy and he'll be a solid player. And he can play the ball forwards and he'll grow into the club and the role and he'll get better. But for me, I think Arsenal are a team that are expected to dominate the ball. And therefore, Declan Rice's ability to break up play and drive forward and distribute the ball or carry it up all the way himself like he did at West Ham and sort of write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. Sorry, I've got a chest infection, boys. It is sort of unneeded because he'll basically just be on the ball and distributing it to one of the attackers more quickly. So I think he'll be a bit wasted, and I really don't think Havertz is great. And they're now going to have to fit both of them into their midfield. And I just don't really see it working. And they still got ran through at times through Forest. So I think Arsenal looked the best. Sort of well-placed team to go and attack City and have another go. But I think Arteta's going to kind of crumble because he's really not going to be sure how to get all the players in the squad, in the team, and playing enough. And I just think the Havertz purchase was a horrific mistake. I didn't watch the Bournemouth West Ham game, but apparently Paquetá's on his way. They've lost Rice. I think they need a goal scorer and some goals injected into their team. And I wish they'd buy Harry Maguire, but it looks like that deal's off. I think Harry Maguire getting his head on Ward-Prowse crosses with a new attacker or midfielder could be quite solid. I think they'll be better than last year. I think last year their head was all about the Europe and they won the trophy, and I think now they can concentrate on the Prem again. Brighton were brilliant. Luton were awful. It's a bit of a difficult one to judge, but Ferguson looks superb. João Pedro looks a smart buy. Estepinian is a machine. People should be trying to buy Estepinian. That guy is brilliant. And I thought Matoma was good as well. Last year, he got sussed out towards the end, and he wasn't quite performing as well as he was. Maybe a break and a bit of a rethink is going to help him, but he's a good, solid player. Brighton are very, very good. They're going to be well up there. They're going to take points off teams, and they're going to have great performances. But ultimately, I don't think they'll win anything. They might win a cup. They could win a cup, but I think selling off your best players puts you in a slightly weaker position to win cups. And I would just say Brighton will have another season where tons of good games, style, moments, but probably won't win anything. Everton, Fulham. Fulham are trying to get rid of Mitrovic, and I glanced at this game on and off briefly, and it just looked like Everton couldn't score, bit ropey in defence, and they just looked generally like a bit of a low-quality team, and I think Fulham were kind of just about sort of better, but also not, because Everton had a load more chances. It was just a strange one when I was flicking through it. Not sure. I think they'll be probably finishing similar around each other. I didn't catch the Sheffield Palace game, so maybe somebody can tell me if they were any good. I know Roy Hodgson, he normally has them defensively solid, and I think Crystal Palace will be all right. I don't think they'll be in trouble this year at all. Newcastle were the best team I saw, but I think the reason for this was Unai Emery had them playing a high line, but it was like he told them to play a high line without them seeing the ins and outs of how a high line works. So they just sort of had everybody stood on the halfway line, and then the Newcastle runners would start coming in and they'd just run off them. Now, the things that impressed me the most about the Newcastle game was how feisty and up for it they were and how heavy they went into the press at the front. But I tell you, man, Isaac, that guy's cold, man. Some of his goals he's scored already, and he's a cold player. And when he did that chip, like, that's such a difficult finish. Like, the Man United strikers couldn't do that. Rashford couldn't do that. Martial wouldn't do that. You know, Garnacho or Anthony wouldn't be able to do that. That was a proper striker's finish. You can wheel on Wilson, who always looks confident. And honestly, it's silly, but their forward lineup is better than, let's say, Rashford up front, Garnacho on the left with Anthony. And this is what Man United fans need to wake up and realise. Like, we have names on a pitch, but they're actually not that great. And there are other teams, because there's so much money and they're building their squads up, they are getting really, really good players and really solid squads. And Newcastle, I think, will be there or thereabouts for that top 4 place if Champions League doesn't affect them too much. But I think they're very good. And I don't worry for Villa either. Biggest home defeat, I think, in their club career in the Prem. But I just think it was just this wild one where they tried this crazy high line. Mings got injured. Newcastle were at home absolutely flying. But I think Aston Villa will be fine. They'll be all right again. Pretty decent, actually, I think. Brentford Spurs. I think Brentford... I watched this match. I think... Weirdly, right? I think Spurs were lucky to score 2 goals, but at the same time, they weren't. So how does that make sense? Well, Maddison got 2 assists, but Spurs' finishing was pretty awful. There was like this Royale goal that he's probably never going to score again, where he kicked it from like the outside of the box. But they attacked so much better. They were so much better to watch as a neutral. And funnily enough, Harry Kane would be great in that team. I think he should have just stayed there and got the Prem record personally, but, you know, I guess he doesn't want to. But I think Spurs will be all right. I don't see them getting in the top 4 because I just think the style of his all-out attacking is going to cause way too many problems in some games where teams have a bit of quality like Brighton, Newcastle, Arsenal, even Man U. I'm not saying we'll beat them, but if they try to play that open, if one of those teams has a good day, they could really punish Spurs. But I think if I was a Spurs fan, I'd be quite impressed and quite pleased about the performance. And I think Maddison looks a good buy. Brentford, they were pretty decent. I think Visa was solid. He got a goal, but kind of faded. They're obviously missing Tony. And Bomu's pretty cold with his penalties. The person that impressed me the most out of this match for Brentford was Henry. I'm actually considering in taking out one of my Man U defenders, Martinez, who didn't play the whole game and got himself booked. I'm thinking of swapping Martinez for Henry because Henry was just bombing up and down that left-hand side all day, fizzing in crosses. And it looked a bit promising. I think Brentford will be okay. Then we watched Chelsea-Liverpool, and I think at the first 25 minutes, I thought, wow, Liverpool are great. They are smoking Chelsea. Chelsea are getting completely overrun. Conor Gallagher in DM kind of area just was getting pinched, turning into people. It was a bit hectic, but they had like a really bad season, and they probably walked out at Stamford Bridge and thought, uh-oh, here we go again. We're against Liverpool. But they settled into the role, made some changes sort of half-time, and they grew into the game. And I thought Enzo Fernandez looked like the player they thought they bought. And I think that's because Poch actually put him in his right position. He's not a DM at all. He's like a box-to-box and a slightly more forward midfielder. Really good on the ball. Didn't lose possession much. Really crisp passing. Exactly the player Man United need. And they're going to get Caicedo to unlock him even further. I thought the defense was good. The wing backs, Chilwell was like a striker. He was brilliant. And I think Chelsea will be good this season. I do. If Jackson turns out to be as good as I think he will be, they'll be rocking this year. Liverpool, I thought Liverpool had goals in them. They were running in behind. They were finding the pockets of space. Mo Salah looked fit. His finishing was crisp. Unlucky to have one ruled offside. And then they took him off. And obviously the game was getting dead hectic because they don't have a defensive midfielder. If they don't buy a defensive midfielder, they could be in trouble, I think. But I'm sure they will do. But Mo Salah threw a hissy fit. He threw a big hissy fit because apparently there's some record where if you... no player or something has scored maybe 3 or 4 times on the opening day of the season, and he wanted that record and he got subbed. And he got subbed at 1-1 with like 30 minutes to go when I feel like he was Liverpool's biggest threat. Like, you don't take off Mo Salah for like a random kid and Nunez when you've got Mo Salah. Like, he can score a goal out of nothing. So I was really surprised about that. He is in my fantasy team. I'm wondering if that could really piss him off and he just doesn't play next week. But I'm sure he will do, which makes the sub even more bizarre. Like, fair enough, if he'd seen something so bad that he hooked him off and he thought, you're not even playing against Brentford at home, fair enough, but you know he's just going to go play against Brentford, so it just makes the whole sub weird. I'd have rather just stuck Salah up top and added a right winger on and just not brought on Nunez. But they'll score goals, Liverpool. They'll have games where it's a bit ropey. They'll have games where they let in one too many. And they'll have games where they blow teams away. But I don't think they'll be as solid as they have been in previous years. Last up, Manchester United, my team. We were awful. Honestly, I'm not just saying it. I know you look at your own team more critically. We were the worst team, man. We were awful. And the reason I say it is because we just had no structure at all. Absolutely no structure. And we seem to effectively have Casemiro playing defensive midfielder and the whole midfield on his own. And there was then 3 Wolves guys in front of him. And then behind those Wolves guys was Bruno, Garnacho, Mason Mount, Rashford, Antony. And Casemiro was basically asked to find a hero ball behind these Wolves players into Bruno or Mount, who would then try and find another hero ball. And it was 90 minutes. There was no recycling of possession. We didn't keep the ball once. We didn't play calmly around and build any attacks. It was really, really worrying. It was really bad. Mason Mount, complete ghost. To me, Mason Mount is basically a number 10. He's like an advanced number 8/10, and he gets in the box and he makes those Lampard-esque runs and he has a shot. Kind of a bit like Bruno. Bruno, for me, would be better being deeper and pinging the ball to Mason Mount. They both sort of play the same position in a strange way, but they also don't. The whole midfield just makes no sense. That midfield 3 of Mason Mount, Bruno, and Casemiro just doesn't work. And I think anyone that's watched them play would know it wouldn't work, especially in that way. So that really surprised me. Martinez got a yellow, and I know he's back from a big injury. Shaw was on a yellow, and I think Wan-Bissaka might have been on a yellow, or Varane, or one of them, or maybe it was just them both. And he was having to dive into tackles, and he just looked like he was going to get sent off. So I think Ten Hag just took him off. I got no points off him for me fantasy league. Varane, he looks composed, but again, I think he needs that partner with him. Onana, he impressed me. Let's be honest, it was a penalty. It wasn't, because he came out for the ball, realised he wasn't going to get the ball and stopped, but he was still flying through midair and clattered the guy. And he didn't mean to foul him. He didn't go out to clean out the player, but it was a penalty, and it would have undone what was a good solid performance. But right at the end, right at the death, he came out and claimed a cross and went down and held onto the ball. David De Gea is never going to do that in a million years. And that's why for 3-4 years, I've been asking to sell David De Gea. I haven't just jumped on this bandwagon. You can even watch the first video on this channel. I think I'm moaning about David De Gea. We're letting goals this year. I don't think our defence is anything to go off. But I think it will also take time to understand what that keeper gives, because for many years we've never considered that the keeper could come out. So when you know the keeper might come out, you can position yourself differently, play differently. And I think our defence will improve over time. Maybe not clean sheet wise, but just the patterns of play and solidity. But we were awful. Rashford up top is a ghost, man. He's grumpy, he walks around, he looks like he don't want to be there. It's just not a good time. And Garnacho, he's a young kid, impact player. He didn't get any joy from Semedo. Antony, his highlight was the highlights on his hair, let's be honest. He chops inside, he stops all counter-attacks, he slows things down, and yet he's still our best right winger. That sums up where we are. We are Manchester United, meant to be going for a title or something. We have no strikers, no sub options. We're not going to have a good season. Unless we go out and buy 4 brilliant players. It's just not happening. And obviously we're not going to go out and buy 4 brilliant players. So it's not happening. I just think we were really poor. It will be a long battle for top 4 with some really disappointing losses in it. And we might just miss out in the end to maybe a Chelsea or someone. So wasn't impressed with Man U at all. Very worrying stuff. And I think Tottenham, if they're more clinical, could put us to the sword. But if they're not clinical, they might leave enough gaps for us to exploit and we might be better, because I don't think we can be worse. I think there was a stat that Bruno and maybe Mount, or maybe it was just Bruno, not sure. Basically, they would dribble past / ran past the most because they were just so advanced that they were just running through. And like it was just desperate defending for like 90 minutes. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on this week of football. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to see this more often, give us a like and a comment. Don't make any money off this, just do it for fun. So if you want to see more from me, here's some more thoughts, then let me know. The only way to let me know is in those comments and with those likes. And if I see that it's doing well, I'll do another. And if I don't see the doing well, then I'll probably just do one again when I fancy it. But if they become well enjoyed, then I'll try to keep up with them. So it's up to you boys and girl out there. All right, have a good one. Peace.